how you managed to ensure that you have that entrepreneurial mindset of ownership, you have the delivery, but also then creating a psychological safety where you can be creative and you can make sure you have the well-being and care element?
I think in my mind and in my heart, the four actually go hand in hand. I seldom see a meaningful tension or an opposing force between the two. It will not be sustainable for any organization to remain just very hard-nosed about the short-term performance and delivery in the short term, because they will not be then creating a tailwind that they need to sustain that into the future. Because quarter on quarter, you cannot just be starting from ground zero. Some point in time, it is going to not be sustainable.
Udayan, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
In the flesh.
I am. I made it. Thank you very much for having me, Chris.
How's the new year treating you?
It's been fabulous. The first few months have been fantastic. A lot of exploration, a lot of different things that I've been busy with. So yeah, it's been pretty good. How's it been for you?
Good. I can't believe it's March.
Absolutely.
I feel like literally the time is literally just flown by this year. Faster than I feel like ever. I don't know why. Maybe I'm busy.
I was actually mentioning to someone that we're already looking at Easter break for the kids, and I just can't believe it. I just thought that Christmas just ended and they just got back to school. So.
Yeah, it's true. My wife was like, what are we going to do for Easter break? And I was like, why are we talking about that? And I was like, oh, okay, right. It's not that far away.
Yeah.
We have to plan that.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about you personally and sort of the journey to where we are now at Reckitt.
Right. So I've been an HR professional for over 25 years now. Started my career in India with what was then the fledgling telecom company and is now actually India's biggest telecom company. Then lived my dream as the Indian IT industry was coming into shape during the early 2000s. Did my stint in consulting and outsourcing, specializing in compensation and benefits, and then moved into consumer goods about 20 years ago with Unilever as the head of reward for South Asia. Then moved on to generalist HR roles with them.
Oh, so you started in a reward space.
I did.
Interesting.
I did. That's my specialism and my first love, should I say, in HR. Then moved into generalist HR space with Unilever as an HR director for Sri Lanka, then back in India. Reckitt came knocking in 2016 and I joined the company as the HR director for South Asia. Then had the Africa, Middle East sort of added to my portfolio as the company went through a restructure. I've moved to the UK about 5 years ago and I'm now the Vice President HR for Reckitt for their corporate functions, including finance, IT and legal.
Nice.
So that's a bit about me. I'm Indian from India, born and bred in the city of New Delhi. Have been here in the UK with my wife. We celebrated 21 years of being married.
Congrats.
Earlier in February. Thank you. We have 2 kids, a daughter who's 15 going on 16 and a son who's 11.
Cool. I'll be calling you for advice then soon. My daughter's
I'm
6.
not sure.
My daughter's 6 and I'm already like, okay, she's a handful and I've only got 1 so far. My wife and I haven't been married for 20 years, but we've been together for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So since we were 17, I'm 37 now. So not married. That's an amazing milestone.
Yeah.
Of marriage.
Yeah.
How long have you been together overall?
No, so we got married soon after we met. It was a traditional Indian kind of thing. So therefore we hadn't been together for long before we got married. But the good thing I think is what you'll also probably experience is you've grown together. You then grow together.
We're not the same people.
You live life experiences together.
Yeah, 100%.
And children are again a joy. I think every age of parenthood is what I've enjoyed. I've enjoyed being a parent to an infant, to a toddler, to a preteen. Now,
does it get easier? Give me some hope.
It doesn't. It's interesting.
Okay, that means yes. It doesn't. I mean, it gets more. It's a different set of challenges.
It is.
Yeah. What's really firstly, what kept you in consumer goods for so long? Right, you could have easily went from Unilever to any, Unilever's known for world-class HR. You probably, with that on your CV, could have gone to many industries. Why continue within the consumer goods, just out of curiosity?
It wasn't a conscious choice of remaining in the industry. I have always been driven by organizations, what they stand for, the values, how they show the values in the real world, and last but not the least, how organizations look at HR and leverage on, should I say, the people agenda and the HR function in driving that people agenda. So both organizations, Unilever and Reckitt, happened because of my attraction to them for who they are as organizations rather than industry.
I love that. I know from working with, Lean and Air and Tim Munden, and part of why that they stayed in the business, for Unilever, for example, is that strong sense of the why and the purpose. And you did a lot of the leading with purpose training, right, with thousands of managers. I was part of one of those sessions, and it was incredible, actually. First time I actually been part of a company or seen that connection of your personal why with the business why, and really how meaningful that can be.
Every organization that I've worked for, and I'm fortunate that I've worked with some fantastic leaders. You named one of them, as the others as well who I've worked with, and I've been fortunate that they've had such a big contribution. I think singularly what has shaped me today, and I say always is going to be part of my identity, are the organizations that I've worked for. And that includes Reckitt, Unilever, Hewitt, which is now part of Aon. That was the organization that I worked in consulting, as well as Sasken and Airtel, which are the first two organizations that I worked with. I learned a lot in all of them, and they shaped me in more ways than one. So the why is important, yes, and as it comes into the conscious is certainly very powerful. But equally, I think who you become as a professional is shaped by the organizations that you tend to go through your journey. Some people go through one or few, and there are others like me who've had the privilege of going through a few and continue to do so.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because as you said that, I was thinking that you don't know it at the time how much is shaping you, right? Because you're in it, right?
Exactly.
It's only when you look back and reflect. If I look back on my career 20 years before HR Leaders, I can see the culmination of experiences, good and bad.
Yeah.
Actually, some of the worst experiences probably I learned the most, and without those, I probably wouldn't be able to be where we are.
No, absolutely.
Today,
Whether it's leadership, whether it's parenting that we were talking about earlier, I have this reflection. I learned a lot about how to be a parent from my parents. I have learned a lot about how to be a leader from my leader. And you learn what to do, but equally you also sometimes learn what not to do from those same experiences. And you're right, there are some great experiences, and then there are some which, should I say, help you reflect on how you would do things differently towards people that you are leading.
Really random question. I never asked this on the show, but what would you be something that you feel like you've learned from your kids that just helped you in business?
Oh, both my kids have helped me and shaped me a lot over the last few years. I mentioned my son is 11. He's autistic and has special needs. And I feel blessed that I have one of the purest souls that I can have. All he wants is just some love and affection. He doesn't have many material desires, should I say, which is quite leveling.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience with my daughter. So when we lived in Sri Lanka, we of course had, expat terms, and therefore it comes with all its frills and fancies. And we had a really nice big car. We then came back to Bombay, which was home country for us. And of course, all of that disappeared and we became, should I say, non-expatriate. So it became a bit more regular. And I remember my daughter got into the car in Bombay and said, oh, we had a white car in Sri Lanka and we had a white car in Bombay. And they were very different vehicles, but for her, it just meant white car. And that taught me what she values. And, it was just so simple, almost like the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah, no, I love
it. A child calls it out. And
it's amazing how the child's mind reviews things.
Yeah.
And I think for me, with Robin, I think one of the things I've learned from her is the curiosity the constant curiosity that you have as a child. You're not impacted by the news or politics or anything really. They're just so curious. And it's kind of one of the things that I try to do in the business is constantly remain curious as well, and just dig a few levels deeper, and just always be kind of create that culture of curiosity with the team. And I see that every day in Robin. She's always, why, Daddy? Why is that? And I'm like, because of this. But she's like, but why? I'm like, oh my God. If any parents understand that when your kid's like asking you more, sometimes I don't even know why as well, right? But I think the curiosity piece is every day I see that in her eyes, and when she's playing and drawing, and just like that's something we need more in our businesses.
Yeah, we do. And I think the other thing that I learn a lot from both my kids every day is they remind me about just the power of feeling and the power of how you connect, because all they care for is just feelings with their parent and nothing else. And I think that's another one that if we can carry through to the workplace is just so important. That I have this mantra in my mind that whenever I'm leading HR, I don't lead HR for X number of people. I always believe that I impact 4X number of lives, because behind everyone, whoever you engage with. So today, if I'm talking to you and all what we do is going to be what it is, but depending on how we feel about each other is going to have an impact on your mood, and you will take that back to your wife and to Robin and to others, right? And this is the same for me. So you always have to remember that you're impacting 4X number of lives around you, and it becomes just so much more powerful then, in terms of also consciously then what are the thoughts, the actions that you're taking, decisions that you're taking at the workplace.
Yeah. We look at that the same here, HR leader, of our content.
Yeah.
We know the content that we put out and the decisions that people will make perhaps based on some of the content that we consume is not just going to change lives in the workplace, but also at home.
Yeah.
So we understand that ripple effect. And I think in the past, that like many organizations in the past separated the two, like they didn't exist.
Yeah.
So you have your work and your home, and we know that that's no longer the case. It almost seems silly to even say it out loud that there's two separate things. It's also, even the way that companies now are positioning their benefits. Very few companies don't offer it beyond the employee to the families. Now it's kind of becoming more common practice that these benefits, of course, your wife and kids or your husband can use these as well. It needs to be more holistic and than just, and it also goes beyond just even their own family, where it's like elderly care, right, and things like that, or fertility treatment. All of these things, I speak to certain friends of mine and I'm like, you know, what's some of the things that your company has done that makes them loyal, or the reason they've been there for so long? It's always things like that. Like they supported me when I needed them. I had an issue personally, I had to take care of my dad. He was struggling and my company was fine. Those are the things that really people remember.
Oh, absolutely. I think the power of benefits should never be underestimated. And having been a reward professional myself, and also one who leverages on that even today, I am such a strong believer of all the various elements that one can use in benefits. They do evolve over a period of time. So if there was a period, let's say in the last century, where visible benefits, tangible benefits like cars or houses or etc.
When I was growing up, that was the
right. It was the norm for all of us growing up. I'm a little older than you, but it was the same there as well in India or in the countries I worked in.
The company car was the thing, right?
It was, right. And in all fairness, it still is at a certain level. If you have a company car, people still love it, and it's maybe taken a different shape and form in the way it manifests itself. But benefits for me does the following. One, it engages the family along with the individual, and we should never underestimate that, because then the decision to leave the organization, I wouldn't say becomes harder or easier, but there is that element that someone needs to consider. I had this learning many years ago when I was doing my reward role in Unilever, where a person who was leaving the company came and said, forget about anything else. The first thing my son asked, so are we going to lose that club membership? Now that of course sounds very elitist, but for the son, that was the place where he went and played tennis. That's where
that's his whole social.
That was his whole social infrastructure, and the father had to then go and explain that. So there you go. It's that real as that. There's also a big security element where I remember when I was doing my HR leader role in India, interacting with the workforce there, we were looking at terminal benefits for them in terms of life cover, etc. And it doesn't cost the company much, especially when you're drawing group covers. And I remember we increased it by quite a bit, and I don't remember what it was, but it was like from 2x, we went to some 4x or something like that. And the amount of goodwill that it generated, I mean, knock on wood, we never wanted anyone to have to use it, but
just to have,
the amount of goodwill that it generated. Or you were mentioning about something like fertility care or elder care. I've been a big fan of giving out what I call as bereavement support, which could be everything from leave to actually making sure that if you can, as a company, take care of certain things that you need to, because obviously people are not going to be at their best at that point in time.
Yeah.
The power of that is going to be far more than the amount that you'll need to spend as an organization.
Yeah, 100%. Right. So
it's again about effort impact, isn't it?
Those are the things that people remember.
Yeah.
Like they carry with them, and they'll go. And you're right. Like the cost, the amount that cost you is going to be 10x in terms of that person's discretionary effort, their engagement, their attention. It's going to outweigh that.
It comes into leadership as well. If I have to ask you, and if I have to reflect as well, when I was talking about all the leaders who've had a fantastic impact on me, it's not because someone gave me the biggest bonus or the biggest promotion. It's about how they supported me
in those times,
whether it was at a time of need or otherwise, in terms of how they encouraged me, sponsored me, and developed me, took a punt on me, whatever, and brought me to where I am today.
Yeah. Bringing us to where we are today, how are you translating some of what we're discussing as you go through the transformation with Reckitt to ensure that you have that culture of well-being, that culture of curiosity, perhaps,
so
as well?
So Reckitt has been on a fascinating journey over the last few years on culture transformation. We have evolved as an organization, as I would say, over several years, and now have 3 robust businesses that we do in the form of home, which is our kind of household products portfolio. Then we have health and we have nutrition. The culture historically in Reckitt, which we also have retained, has been a strong sense of ownership. And ownership for us translates into being accountable. You're an owner, you run your own establishment, Chris, so you would know this better than I do, that finally the buck stops with you. And I think that level of accountability is there. At the same time, when the establishment does well, there is also benefits to be reaped and rewards to be had, which is also for you. So, and that's again the risk reward ratio that one goes in, either as an entrepreneur, in this case they're managers, but still have that quite high. That level of ownership then also extends, should I say, to the way people treat their own careers within Reckitt, and that's one. At the same time, as we are evolving as an organization, bringing in that element of care, as managers who need to harness others in the organization, has been supreme. So over the last 5 years that I have been in my role, I have worked a lot with our senior leaders on really harnessing the next level of leaders who have then gone on to CXO-1 roles, or even below, and then have kind of grown into other roles that have fed into the pipeline for the future, with keeping both the balance of performance, delivery, potential, and then also how do they care and harness future potential and talent in the organization. So that's really how we've looked at it. Elements on well-being, inclusion, which are very important, vital, because they do provide the necessary reminders, impetus, as well as topics for people to consider, are enablers in this holistic picture that we are drawing as an organization into the future.
What you mentioned briefly though, but what's the main why behind the transformation? You mentioned you want to keep the core of your culture, but when you say transformation, what was driving that?
It is essentially the ambition and the vision of the organization that we've drawn out in terms of what the purpose of the organization is and how it has to come alive. The leadership behaviors were looked at and revised a few years ago, And the 4 leadership behaviors that are there in the organization are the ones that have been identified as being the most essential and the ones that we need in the highest order.
What are
for
those?
us to
I have to ask
consider.
you.
I will mention that, of course. So it is own, as I said, being a company of owners. Create, so really looking at creativity and promoting that in the organization in everything we do.
I love that.
Care, which is, as I mentioned, about caring for not just yourself, but also being responsible as a corporate citizen about caring about people who are around you, which could be your partners, it could be your stakeholders, it could be your customers, it could be your suppliers, and essentially the world that you are impacting. And last but not the least, deliver, because we are a business and we do have to deliver, and we should not lose focus on that. So those are really the 4 main or the 4 leadership behaviors that the group has.
What was your approach about, because there's many companies I'm chatting to right now that are going through the similar process, like how did you define those and get feedback?
So it was a process where we had people who obviously went through a lot of, should I say, data gathering in the organization, whether that was through surveys or that was through focus group discussions about really retaining about what's best for Reckitt and what has been core for our organization, and you don't want to lose that essence. And at the same time, what is it that you need to modulate and what is it that you want to bring for the future? So the elements of own and deliver are ones that would resonate a lot with people who have been associated with Reckitt for a long time, in whichever shape and form the organization was called, because the name of the company has also changed from Reckitt Benckiser to Reckitt RB to now Reckitt. So own and deliver would be ones that would really be true to that. And should I say, we've kind of then added on, this is my view, by the way, that we've added on these new elements of care and create to sort of really come up with what is most relevant and one that will take us into the future.
I find the 4, firstly, I love the fact that you just chose 4, because sometimes there's like 10 right, in companies, and it's like it's hard to even remember half of that, right? And then,
I know exactly what you mean.
And then you're like, okay, now how do these 4 principles, values show up? How do we make sure they show up in every part of the business, every part of the employee life cycle, our processes, etc., right? To really embed that. Because it can't just be the words on the wall, right? Like we discussed earlier as well. But there's also an interesting balance between those, because you have curiosity, care, but at the same time, the entrepreneurial part and the delivery. And normally, sometimes they don't work very well together, right? Like, and I had my previous company was a high pressure sales organization. Very like a Wolf of Wall Street, very high pressure sales, and they would say things like care, but it didn't really show up in the workplace, right? So how you managed to ensure that you have that entrepreneurial mindset of ownership, you have the delivery, but also then creating a psychological safety where you can be creative and you can make sure you have the well-being and care element. Does that make sense? It question?
Does. The question makes sense. I think in my mind and in my heart, should I say, the 4 actually go hand in hand. And I seldom see, should I say, a meaningful tension or an opposing force between the 2. Why do I say that? The example that you're giving, and God bless the organization, but it will not be sustainable for any organization to remain just very hard-nosed about the short-term performance and delivery in the short term, because they will not be then creating, should I say, the adequate runway or the tailwind that they need to sustain that into the future. Because quarter on quarter, you cannot just be starting from ground zero.
And by the way, the turnover was insane.
And smashing 100.
Yeah.
So at some point in time, it is going to not be sustainable. And therefore, to be able to balance not short-term performance and long-term performance, but to say what are the decisions that I would take which will also secure performance into the future. I'll give another example from the time that I was in consulting, where a lot of your projects are one-off and therefore get you the big ticket in terms of the revenues for that. But then you also do look for sustainable relationships that do guarantee some amount of ongoing revenue for the firm. That could be annuity, multi-year contracts, etc., etc. Now, therefore, that's where the whole element of, should I say, creativity comes in. Because if you're a good entrepreneur and you are a good owner, then you will have to dial up your creativity to be able to sustain that over a period of time. The care element has to come in because it's, again, as I said, care not just for your employees and it's not just about, wearing kid gloves and sort of being pedantic or paternalistic towards your employees, but also being responsible as an organization in the world that you're operating in.
Yeah.
And last but not the least, the focus on delivery, because finally that is what the organization is there for, is essential. You asked, how do we bring it alive? It is an essential element of the way leaders are looked at and the way leaders are assessed in the organization. It is part of, should I say, the syntax, and that's why it flowed out so easily from my tongue. In the way we speak to and talk about leaders when they're evaluated. Of course, leaders get rewarded for short-term and immediate delivery in the form of what they earn for the year or the immediate opportunities that could come their way. But when it talks about investment into the future, these are the elements that then come in a big way.
Yeah.
We also have programs that are there in place where leaders are also given adequate feedback about how they're doing, what's the impact that they're creating, which could be through engagement surveys that the company has done, or it could be through, should I say, dedicated or bespoke 360 feedback. It's all done in that framework.
Yeah.
Finally. And I think I personally believe the power of being able to embed something well is just staying true to the course, because there is no right or wrong between a 4-element model or a 10-element model. Aside from the 4-element one, as you said, is much easier to just consume and communicate across and imbibe and embed. Not embed, but imbibe. But I mean, I'm saying intellectually or, theoretically, there's nothing wrong with one or the other. But staying true to that over a period of time and being able to put that in every part of your organization. I also want to mention here that I think that your leadership values also have to show, not just in the way you're assessing people, because oftentimes we tend to take values and tend to just put that into people.
Yeah.
But it also has to show in your other elements. For me, the other elements are the way you run your business and your operations. How are you doing business? What are the brands?
Can you give me an example?
The example I would give is, today, if we look at any of our brands that are household brands, they rely a lot on the trust that people have towards them. So if you go and pick up, and I hope so you do.
I can tell you I used one last night. Strepsils.
There you go.
And I've used that brand for ever. So whenever I have a sore throat right now.
Yeah.
So literally, I picked it up yesterday in the shop and I was like, oh, I'm going to be speaking to you tomorrow. Because I know it is a Reckitt product. And most people probably don't even know the name Reckitt. Can they use the
we are known much more for our brands, and a lot of times, yes, I do need to qualify where I work with the brand. So if it's a brand like Dettol, or it's a brand like Durex, or a brand like Nurofen.
Is it Persil as well?
Sorry?
What's the cleaning product one?
Our cleaning products are Finish, which is the dishwasher.
That's what I was thinking. Well, I used that. I knew there was one. I was like,
so yeah. And I think all of those brands stand and are the ones that would, in maybe even in a very subconscious way, live the leadership values that we have. And that's what I mean by
I never really thought about it like that, but it's true.
Yeah. And now that I'm mentioning it, you would take that back and say, hey, does that stand for that? Right. The other form in which it has to come alive is just the way you structured your organization as well. Are you structured as an organization? So I could say that, hey, I want to be the most entrepreneurial organization. I'm making this up, by the way. But if I have 10 layers to the top, which everything going up for approvals and sign-offs before it comes back, it's not an entrepreneurial organization. No. You mentioned something about creating psychological safety. It's in the everyday. I remember one of my bosses telling me soon after I joined Reckitt, I don't mind you make 10 mistakes, but fail fast. And out of those 10 mistakes you make, learn and then get 4 things that are right and are so big that it makes a big difference. I think that's the element where, something like entrepreneurialism with safety comes in. We all make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
None of us gets everything right 100% all the time. But that's where it then comes alive in structures as well. So I really see organization values, culture, which gets talked about in a very sometimes amorphous way, being brought alive in the way you do business. What do your brand stand for? Who are your key customers? Who are the people that you're doing business with? On one hand, in your own structures, in the way you structured the organization, because if you were to walk into the organization tomorrow, whether as an employee or as a partner, how are you experiencing the organization? We could say entrepreneurial. Then you come to me and make a proposal, and then I'll say, hang on, Chris, I have to go to 5 people to get their approval on, whether the thing works or not, or, whether we're going to approve it or not. It's not going to give you a feeling that it's a very entrepreneurial organization.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, like, at the scale and the size of the business, you kind of have to be to remain competitive. You need to move quickly, be agile as an organization. And if you won't survive long if you're having to go through 10 layers of approval, you're already going to miss the boat as well. So I think there's also part of the traditional hierarchy that I grew up in, and that you probably grew up in. The pace of change and transformation and disruption, that model doesn't work. There's no longer this, here's 50 years of stability that we can go through. It won't work.
Yeah, I think it's, in a way, just the way we are leading and experiencing our own lives. If we think of ourselves, and I will remind ourselves to 6 years ago now, we're in 2025. So it doesn't seem that long back, but then 6 years is a long time. If 6 years ago, somebody told us at the beginning of the year in 2019 that you will all be stuck at home wearing masks and will be nameless and faceless, literally.
Yeah.
We would have laughed at that, right? That there will be a global pandemic and everyone would be stuck. So, I mean, of course, COVID has been a big event for all of us that we have lived through. And the comparisons being made was the Spanish flu, which happened in the early part of the 20th century. So it is a life-changing event that we have gone through. Having said that, another good example that I have, and let's look at even consumer goods as an industry. If you really see the growth of Europe and the revenue growth that Europe has had, and how it is not very far from what the developing and the emerging and the growth markets are. So, a few years ago, people wouldn't have imagined that. And I think that's the pace of change, and that's the real change that we are all going through. You're talking to me about your studio and the technology that you have here, and you know it as much as anyone else, and I know it, that it's going to be obsolete if it's not already in 6 months' time.
It moves fast.
Things move fast. I mean, we are today talking with this big microphone. Tomorrow there may not be one, and it will not take long for these innovations to take place, for life to change, and for it to be accessible. That's the other thing. The accessibility has gone up so much. I also think there's a generational shift. The generational shift from the time that I grew up, I suspect so did you, versus now, is we grew up in an environment where we learned by learning from the experiences of others. Whether that was, and remind me, you said you played sport, right? You played rugby, ice hockey, basketball.
Yeah.
What was your coach doing? Your coach was basically not, it might have begun with teaching you the basics of this game and the techniques. After a point in time, he wasn't teaching you how to shoot a 3-pointer, but he was teaching you with his experiences or her own experiences on how do you apply yourself. This generation, and it's interesting when you spoke about Robin and about how, curious she is, they are learning by creating.
They just do it.
They are doing it. They have tools in front of them where they create.
Yeah.
They're getting assessed also on what they are creating, not on past experiences that they are gathering of other people and then regurgitating that out in any shape and form. So as the world is evolving, these structures are also going to change. So of course, I took the example of saying 10 layers, but it's not just 10 layers. It could be just whether you have a very strong command and control model with just one boss at the top, he may be just sitting right above you, versus the independence that you have to operate. So the world is bound to change, and just the way we need to interact with the people who are coming into the workforce is going to evolve as well.
It's so interesting you say that, because I kind of have like a conflict of like, with we talk about creativity, like those my daughter creating things, with the use of AI, ChatGPT, I'm seeing that you kind of removing some of the critical thinking and the learning process, because you don't have to, because you can, we grew up starting with a blank piece of paper. The employees of today coming in, and my daughter and who grown up, they can just ask ChatGPT to generate that without having to think, how do I structure this email? How do I tell a story? All of the elements that we had to think through and use a different part of our brain to create that, because we didn't have those tools. So I'm wondering, do you think that's gonna? I just want to hear your views on that, because I feel like I'm that's one of like my concerns. Is like, I'm lucky that I'm not saying lucky. I spend a lot of time with Robin away from the devices, and she's constantly painting, drawing, sculpting. She loves like anything arts and crafts. Yeah, and then she does have some screen time, of course, as well. But I want to kind of foster that creativity in her, because otherwise, if I just give her a tablet with digital content, there was even a YouTube kids channel that she was watching, and the whole channel was about someone generating images with AI, and she was obsessed because it was just someone generating her favorite characters from her favorite show with AI, and she's like, Dad, can we use this tool and start generating some cool things? And I was like, you're 6 and you're curious about using AI. Some of our employees aren't even doing that right now, and a 6-year-old is really, anyway. So there's a lot of rambling there, but
you raise an important point. I think the way I see it is, technology will always enable and will therefore challenge the next level to use their minds and their brains to a different order and magnitude. If we started out with a blank piece of paper and habitually, which we still do, I'm sure, we both have now the facility where whether we go into our email or we go into LinkedIn or wherever we do, there is that button which says use AI to generate a message. I don't use it. Tell me if you do.
I use it to, I 100% use it to summarize my podcasts.
But
for those,
but not to write an email, right?
No. Not an email. Or it depends. If it's something like really generic, I'll generate it and then I'll edit it. Yeah. Right. But if it's an important email, of course, I'm not sending customers AI generated emails, right? But if it's something simple, like, hey, write me an email on X that I want to send to the team, and then I change it. Yeah. But you can get in trouble like that as well. So you gotta be careful.
So the point I'm trying to make here is that we are still in that generation where we're again using our experience.
We're half in, half out.
And then we still need to generate everything from scratch. Whereas the next generation will both be looking at these as a given. And then will be evaluated further on what are they using that for to create, should I say, higher order output. I'm reminded of someone mentioned that how writing essays has now become very AI driven. Apparently a lot of students in their college applications are actively using AI. I don't see anything wrong in that, because I'm sure in the past also, anyone who could afford it might have used a shadow writer to do that.
Or just copy a paper.
Or copy the past paper. The fact that all of us have learned in a way, any should I say subject where there's a certain formulaic approach to it, whether it was a science or an art. But I think what it does is it enables people to see what they need to learn and how do they use AI or any of these things that are coming through and improving and increasing their productivity. You look at AI, you look at new means of communication. Today, the world is just such a small place that we can communicate with each other, talk to each other, be real with each other. Yes, whilst we are in the flesh here, but we have many other alternatives to do that. And all of that coming together, also with the world becoming a much smaller place. So you mentioned, right, briefly that you're packing and you're all going to go to New York.
Mm-hmm.
So the amount that you're traveling right now and the way the world is and the world that you want to show Robin is just probably so different
Yeah.
than what our parents, no matter what they did, where they came from, what their worldview was in terms of what to show us. So there's also a lot more that they're going to sort of ingest, and therefore using the tools that they have before them, the output is going to be interesting, and one that will need to see how that evolves over a period of time. I think we will be a generation where the pace of change is just so quick. Just look at how AI, even in the last 2 to 3 years, has become so part and parcel of our lives today, right? I mean, anything from Microsoft Copilot to Spotify generating your own content for you on what the playlist could be, etc. And it's just going to improve. So there we go. I today have, I'm a bit into physical fitness and sort of taking care of myself. And I wear this Whoop band.
Yeah.
And there is now a beta version of a Whoop coach available who has a daily interaction with me to try and, based on my parameters, suggest what exercise to do, what rest to take.
Yeah. Hey, you're overdoing it today. Relax.
Exactly. Or even being very specific to say, maybe you want to release tension in your muscles today. So think of something like a cold shower or, an ice bath.
Because you ran X amount.
Exactly.
Because it knows.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I feel like it's going to make what people describe in the, as soft skills, which I kind of use the word power skills. I don't like the word soft skills. That they're going to become more and more important.
Yes.
In my opinion, as the hard skills, a lot of that can be done by AI now, right? Even coding.
Yeah.
I saw an interview with Mark Zuckerberg a few weeks ago, and he said he believes that 80% of what his engineers can do by the end of the year, AI will be able to do, which is crazy just to think about.
There we go.
That as well. So it means that curiosity, the empathy, all of the soft skills that we kind of took for granted are going to be even more important moving forward as that technology evolves.
I think for me, and that's a very interesting point that you make of what Mark Zuckerberg said. I haven't seen that, but imagine the power of what it can then create as possibilities.
I know.
Because today, I guess there could have been a desire and a sort of I'm picturing like a storyboard of what we want as a group, or, what we want Facebook to be, or, whichever other Instagram to be, etc. if it is that group, Meta, that we are talking about. But they might have also been limited by the physical ability of people in terms of what they can code.
Yeah, I know. I feel like, well, when you look into some of the most amazing, we're going to go on a ramble down a whole rabbit hole now. When you look at some of the most, let me give you an example. Apple would not be Apple without, was it named Jimmy Iovine? Was it Johnny Ive? Their chief creative officer.
Yeah.
Right, because you had the coders and developers, but the design of the iPhone, the design of the iPod, the iPad was all through his creative team. Now, he can't code.
Yeah.
But imagine if he could. Imagine if he could, and a lot of the artists out there and the creatives who normally, traditionally, not always, don't have their brains work very differently from someone who's a programmer and engineer versus a creative. Now you give the engineers the creativity, and now you give the creatives the engineering capability, because they can now generate through AI. That's going to unlock, and it doesn't cost millions of pounds in investment to hire a whole team,
bunch of designers,
right? So the barrier to entry, to the accessibility piece, which is from any country, anywhere, if you have an internet connection, it's going to be amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm already seeing, we're looking at building a new website right now, and I found this I think it was called 10 Web. I think that's the name. And I just copied and pasted Apple's website link in the AI and said, generate me a website that looks exactly like this. And it did it in like 10 minutes. And I was like, and I literally clicked in, I just had to change the image and type in the new text. And I was like, this is literally something
It's
that I got
insane.
quoted
Yeah.
like £50,000 for.
Yeah.
I've just been able to copy and literally the exact same thing. You plug in your payment gateway, you buy a domain, all in the same AI platform. They're not separate company. They're not separate platform. They've integrated everything in there, and you're ready to go, and you've got a website.
I heard someone say the other day that they are from the medical devices industry. Radiologists are coming out and saying AI-based tools are looking at all kinds of reports or images as radiologists look at, and coming out with significantly more in terms of what possibilities of
course,
diseases or what something wrong or right could be in those than what the human eye can, because it's again experiential.
You can't think, you can't retain all of that. Whereas with AI, I had this recently. So I have a private doctor in Harley Street. I went to see him, and he had an AI note taker on the desk. And the reason I knew that, because typically when you go and see a doctor or anyone listening, obviously they're sitting there writing their notes.
Yeah.
And they're not really present in the conversation. You can't really be present and really when you're like, oh, I've got to write all this down, right?
Yeah.
And it just struck me because he was making eye contact and he was fully immersed in the conversation with me. And not only was it an AI note taker, but it was a sort of a medical AI that would, based on what I was saying, it was making suggestions to him of what could be the reason I'm having these migraines.
There we go. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's doing the research in real time.
Yeah.
And giving that doctor feedback and say, actually, maybe ask this question to Chris. And maybe it could be that. And based on his medical history, it could be this. And I was just like, my mind was blown, honestly, in that moment. And it's just very simple.
Well, absolutely.
Application.
Absolutely. The possibilities are endless. And I think it's just about getting comfortable with how these would enable us into the future. It's inevitable.
It's already here.
It is already there, and it is going to get more and more into our lives.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, I can talk to you forever.
Yes, likewise.
And I know we didn't even plan on talking about things to talk about. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise.
And I'm happy that we didn't go on script and we went off script, because it was actually way more of a meaningful.
I thought as well. Yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Good to see you in person, and
likewise.
Wish you all the best until next week.
Thank you.